Well, good morning, pharmacy mavens. Welcome to www.salessystem.com.au. My name's Glenn Guilfoyle and I head up the specialist group called The Next Level, and we exist in the passionate belief of assisting pharmacies to reinvent to a high engagement, high counsel, high solution sale service model at the dispensary. And so therefore, welcome back to this monthly series that in fact puts the spotlight on that broad pursuit by way of introducing and wheeling through a number of topics and insights in pursuit of that theme. Now, last month, and you can always access last month's by going onto the web site version and just clicking through. Last month we looked or took a particular deep dive look into the data that we've collected over the past three to 4 years across some 130 odd retail pharmacies by way of looking at the particular metrics that we score, 30 in fact, when we go into a pharmacy and do our work, that fall under the two broad topics of customer engagement effectiveness and script processing efficiency. And in particular, last month we focused on those particular correlations across the behavioural metrics in support of and focusing on the script processing efficiency side of things. You might recall I did promise that when we come back this month I would flip over and look at the correlations between those metrics that are relevant to customer engagement effectiveness. So just before we wheel into that, and there are some really interesting findings and outcomes in that sense, just a very quick 101 refresher of the notion of correlations and using data in this way. So if you think about 30 metrics all wrapped around various behavioural and commercial aspects at the dispensary, and you think of the notion of alphabetically listing the pharmacies for each one of the 30 metrics and looking at the actual performance ranking top to bottom for any one of the metrics, running two such metrics side by side to look for the correlation in the rankings between the two metrics. This is a normal statistical business means for identifying and defining best practices as it relates to behavioural activities and desired commercial outcomes. And we can apply this technique in retail pharmacy just as we do in just about any business setting. So with that in mind then, here we go, and starting with what we at the Next Level always think is one of the most underrated behavioural elements and therefore metrics on our scoreboard, that being the notion of visit retention rate, which, just to refresh your memory, is the simple notion of one visit, one dispense. How often does the customer stay in the store? One visit, one dispense, versus hand their script in, go and do the shopping and come back, therefore breaking their one dispense into two visits. So if we line up all of the pharmacies that we've scored and looked at their particular performance rankings and scores on visit retention rate, and then line up the data that we've collected on the actual visit duration, and in particular the engagement part of the visit duration, and prosecute the data in such a way as to try to understand or derive an answer to the question, is there a relationship, is there a correlation between visit retention rate performance and engagement duration? And when we do that statistical or apply that statistical technique to these two metrics, the data actually tells us that there is a weak correlation, although it does reach a statistical significance level. So we can with some confidence therefore say that high visit retention rate does lead to a higher engagement of the customer. So let's continue our deep dive, taking another step further. So keeping on with visit or engagement duration and looking at then the rankings and the performance of counsel So proactive counsel as a subset of overall engagement. And when we look for correlations in the same way, top to alphabetical ranking, looking at the performance for engagement duration, and for the same pharmacies looking at their performance for counsel duration, and ask the data, is there a correlation between the two? We find there this time that the answer is yes, and it's a stronger relationship and it reaches statistical significance. On we go. So engage or counsel duration and counsel frequency. Is there a relationship between these two behaviours? And indeed, again, the data tells us that there is a strong relationship and it reaches statistical significance. By the way, if we just go back a step for a moment and look at any relationship that the data might tell us between counsel duration and visit retention rate, again, we find a strong statistical correlation, and it also reaches statistical significance. So this might not be surprising, it's all kind of intuitive in a way, but I think now for the first time in the industry we do have robust data that can actually validate certain assumptions that we might all make. So in short then, what does all this mean? It means that if you have a compelling value proposition to be able to confidently invite your script-bearing customers to stay in the store for the duration of their process, it's very likely that you will engage them longer, which in turn means that you're very likely to engage them in proactive counsel longer and more frequently. And this, of course, is heading in the direction of what the peak bodies would tell us as best practices. So let's continue our deep dive. Let's dive a little bit deeper now and look at these kind of behaviours in terms of who is undertaking these sorts of activities. And when I say who, I'm really talking about the role types in the pharmacy, not any given person or personality. So classically, pharmacist versus tech, versus student intern versus pharmacist assistant. So again, lining up the data, alphabetical listing, performance rankings for one set of data for one metric against the set of data for a different metric. Now we're looking at duration of counsel, which we've already looked at before, and this time the degree to which the pharmacy has a forward orientation of the pharmacist, and the pharmacist is the role type doing most of this sort of counsel. And again, probably not surprisingly, we find a strong correlation between those more forward oriented pharmacies at the script counter and elongated counsel. So when we move over to the S2 and S3 counter, to ask the data the same kind of question, is there a relationship between those pharmacies with a more forward orientation of the pharmacist at the S2, S3 counter and elongated counsel? Perhaps intriguingly, we find this time there is no correlation. So this surprised us a little bit. And so on we go then with our deep dive, and let's take another deeper dive and look at what we've learned so far in relation to volume sales. And when I talk about volume sales, I'm talking about add-ons of non-scripted health category products to script customers. And I'm also talking about basket size, or the number of non-script health category products for S2, S3 visiting customers. And when we run the relationships like we have before, degree of forward orientation of the pharmacist and duration of counsel, we find mixed results, some having no correlation and some even slightly suggestive of a negative correlation, although no statistical significance. It really is a very mixed and non-compelling picture. Now, so that begs the so what question. Again, keep in mind this kind of work is very much still a work in progress, and our pool of 130 continues to grow, and we think that over time the correlations and therefore the reliability of the interpretations we're able to draw will become stronger and clearer as time goes by. But at this stage, we do have a hypothesis for this apparent conundrum that we're seeing when it comes to volume sales and the lack of correlations between the types of activities that we would expect to be related to higher volume sales. And our hypothesis goes something like this. Within the industry, Retail Pharmacy Australia, we see that there's still a relatively small subset of pharmacies that are delivering consistent and regular proactive counsel. But there's even a smaller subset of those that actually go the extra step and turn that counsel into a solution sale conversation, thereby driving up add-ons and complementary medicines at both the script and the S2, S3 counter. So we think this is a wonderful opportunity, especially given the background of what's happening in the industry that we all face. And so before I close off, just to take the final step or the final dive in this kind of deep dive into our data, we turned from volume to look at value, i.e. the actual revenue or the size of revenue in relation to the volume that are of health category products, non-scripted health category products that are being sold or added on. And again, forward-oriented pharmacies and those pharmacies that are delivering a higher degree of counsel, the relationship to value of the volume, again, is somewhat mixed, although there is a clear trend that the forward-oriented pharmacies do have a correlation that reaches some statistical significance in relation to the size of the value. So what does therefore this all mean? So we believe that there is a very clear and compelling message coming out of all of this. Convert customers to stay, convert stay to engaged, convert engaged to counsel, and then convert counsel to a solution sale conversation. And to underpin all of this, convert pharmacists to forward. That brings me full circle to where I started, and that is a message and hopefully some things for you to think about in relation to the development of your high engagement, high counsel, high solution sale, forward-oriented service model at the dispensary. If you've enjoyed and found some value in this post, the best way you can thank us is to forward it on to members of your team or other pharmacy colleagues in your network. If you would like to continue this discourse with a one-on-one conversation, I'd be delighted to personally have that chat with you over the phone on 0418 519 755. And in any event, I hope you're able to use this information to move your service model to the next level. I'll come back next month and we'll look at the emerging proposition and hypothesis of what the service model actually needs to look like against the backdrop of the negative forces in the industry and what this data is telling us. In the meantime, move up to the next level. Bye for now.